4 centuries, people have searched for any physical description of Jesus Christ. The Bible itself offers little detail about his appearance, leaving historians, theologians, and artists to speculate. But then an ancient letter surfaced, a letter attributed to Publius Lentulus, a supposed Roman governor of Judea before Pontius Pilate. This letter claims to reveal the true physical features of Jesus, describing him in striking detail. But is this letter authentic? Does it actually uncover a hidden truth about Jesus? Or is it simply a historical hoax? To understand the reality behind the letter of Lentulus, we need to explore its origins, its content, and the controversy surrounding it. The letter of Lentulus is said to be an official Roman report written by Publius Lentulus, supposedly sent to the Roman Senate. In it, he describes Jesus as a man of unmatched beauty with golden hair, serene eyes, and a divine aura that set him apart from all others. According to the letter, Jesus had a noble stature, wavy chestnut-colored hair, and a face that radiated both wisdom and kindness. The letter paints a breathtaking portrait of Jesus, one that aligns with the classic depictions of Christ found in Renaissance art. But here's the problem. There is no historical evidence that a Roman governor named Publius Lentulus ever existed. This immediately raises red flags about the letter's authenticity. Despite doubts about its legitimacy, the letter of Lentulus spread widely across Europe during the Middle Ages. It was frequently referenced in religious texts, copied by scribes, and even used by artists to depict Jesus in paintings and sculptures. The idea of a physically beautiful, noble-looking Jesus fit perfectly with the Christian art and theology of the time. But where did this letter come from? And if it wasn't written by a Roman official, who created it, and why? Historians now believe that the letter of Lentulus is not an ancient Roman document, but a medieval forgery. The first known references to it appear in the 15th century, long after the time of Jesus. Scholars suggest that the letter was likely written by a European monk or scholar who wanted to provide a detailed, noble description of Christ that could be used in religious teachings. One of the biggest clues that the letter is a forgery lies in the language it uses. The wording and style do not match authentic Roman reports from the time. Additionally, no Roman historian, such as Tacitus or Josephus, ever mentions Publius Lentulus as a governor of Judea. The entire persona of Lentulus appears to have been fabricated to add credibility to the letter. But if the letter is a forgery, why would someone create it? And why did it become so influential? One possibility is that the letter was meant to reinforce Christian beliefs during the Middle Ages. At the time, the Catholic Church held immense power, and religious artifacts, texts, and relics were commonly used to inspire faith. A detailed, official-sounding description of Jesus would have given worshippers a vivid image of their Savior, one that aligned with their artistic and theological ideals. Another reason could be the demand for relics and sacred texts during medieval times. People sought tangible connections to biblical events, and forgers often created fake documents, relics, and artifacts to meet this demand. The letter of Lentulus might have been one such creation, designed to add historical weight to the idea of a majestic, European-looking Christ. But here's where things get even more intriguing. Did the letter influence how Jesus is depicted today? If you look at most classic depictions of Jesus, especially in European and Renaissance art, you'll notice a pattern. He is often shown as a tall, fair-skinned man with long, flowing hair and a calm, noble expression. This version of Jesus doesn't necessarily match descriptions of men from first-century Judea, but it does match the image described in the letter of Lentulus. Could this medieval forgery have played a role in shaping our modern perception of Jesus? Some scholars believe so. Over time, artists and theologians drew inspiration from the letter, reinforcing its description of Christ. Even today, many traditional depictions of Jesus resemble the Lentulus description rather than historical reconstructions of what a first-century Jewish man likely looked like. But if the letter of Lentulus is a forgery, what did Jesus actually look like? While we may never have an exact image of Jesus, historians and archaeologists have used ancient texts, cultural evidence, and forensic reconstructions to propose a more accurate depiction. Based on these findings, Jesus most likely had darker skin, consistent with Middle Eastern populations of his time, shorter, curly hair, and a beard in line with Jewish customs. His height would have been average for a first-century Judean man, likely around 165 centimeters, and his appearance would have been rugged due to his life as a carpenter and traveling preacher. This portrayal is vastly different from the noble, European-style Jesus in the letter of Lentulus. Despite the overwhelming evidence that it's a forgery, The letter of Lentulus still fascinates people today. It continues to circulate in religious discussions, books, and online forums. Some believe it holds hidden truths, while others see it as an example of how history can be rewritten to fit religious and artistic ideals. The story of this letter serves as a powerful reminder of how historical myths can shape our understanding of the past. While the real Jesus may never be fully known in appearance, separating fact from fiction helps us get closer to the truth. So the next time you see a classic painting of Jesus with golden hair, blue eyes, and a peaceful gaze, remember, it may not be based on history, but rather on a letter that was never meant to exist in the first place. If the letter of Lentulus was a medieval forgery, how did it become so widely accepted? The answer lies in how information was controlled and shared during the Middle Ages. At that time, the Catholic Church held immense influence over historical narratives, and written texts were considered authoritative, especially if they appeared to come from ancient sources. The letter was copied and distributed through monasteries, where scribes transcribed religious texts by hand. Since there was no easy way to verify historical accuracy, many people assumed that the document was real. Over time, it became part of religious literature, referenced in sermons, theological discussions, and even used to justify artistic representations of Christ. One of the most significant periods for the spread of the letter was during the Renaissance, when European artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo sought inspiration for their religious paintings. The noble and serene image of Jesus described in the letter fit perfectly with their vision of divinity, leading to the iconic depictions of Christ that are still recognized today. How do we know the letter is a fake? Several key facts expose the letter as a later creation rather than an authentic historical document. First, there is no historical evidence that a Roman governor named Publius Lentulus ever existed in Judea. If he had, he would likely be mentioned in Roman records, yet he appears nowhere in Roman or Jewish historical accounts. Second, the style and structure of the letter do not match the formal reports written by Roman officials during the 1st century. Scholars have noted that the Latin used in the letter contains medieval phrasing, making it unlikely that it was written in antiquity. Third, the earliest known copies of the letter only appear in the 15th century, meaning it was unknown for over 1,400 years after Jesus' lifetime. If it were a real Roman document, it would have been referenced much earlier in Christian history. Finally, the image of Jesus in the letter conflicts with historical evidence. The description aligns more with medieval European ideals than with what a Jewish man from 1st century Judea would have looked like, raising suspicions that the letter was crafted to reinforce pre-existing religious imagery rather than to provide an accurate historical account. The letter of Lentulus is just one example of many religious forgeries that emerged throughout history. In the Middle Ages, fake relics, false gospels, and fabricated letters were not uncommon. Many were created with good intentions, to inspire faith, to give people a tangible connection to biblical figures, or to strengthen religious teachings. For example, other famous religious forgeries include the donation of Constantine, a document supposedly granting political power to the Pope, later exposed as a medieval fabrication, the Gospel of Barnabas, a text that contradicts canonical Christian teachings and is believed to be a later creation, and the secret Gospel of Mark, a controversial text that some claim was forged to support specific theological arguments. These documents, like the letter of Lentulus, were used to shape religious beliefs and narratives, sometimes for political power, sometimes for artistic influence, and sometimes simply because people wanted to believe them. Why do people continue to believe in historically questionable texts like the letter of Lentulus? The answer lies in psychology. People are often drawn to mysteries, hidden knowledge, and lost history. The idea that a secret Roman letter describing Jesus might exist is exciting, and it plays into the natural human desire to fill in the gaps of history. Additionally, confirmation bias plays a role. If someone has always imagined Jesus as looking like the classic Renaissance paintings, they are more likely to accept the letter as real, even when presented with historical evidence to the contrary. Let's imagine for a moment that the letter of Lentulus were real. What would that mean? It would be the only known physical description of Jesus from his own time, making it one of the most important historical discoveries in religious history. It would provide insight into how Jesus was perceived by the Romans, potentially confirming aspects of his presence, his influence, and even his divinity. It could reshape Christian iconography, forcing historians and theologians to re-evaluate centuries of artistic tradition. But since we know the letter is a medieval invention, it instead serves as a lesson in historical skepticism. It reminds us to question the sources of our information and to separate faith from fabricated history.